Yo, what's up? This is your girl Dragon and welcome to another Fortnite Creative tutorial. This one's by special request. Alright, so this tutorial derives from a question that was asked in the Fortnite Creative Discord, and this comes from Ryder. He wants to put together a really cool concept for a race map, and this is what he's trying to do. He says, is there a way to make it so when someone finishes the race, their bike is destroyed, and it will teleport them to a watchtower? But what he's curious about is there a way to make it so after the last player finishes the race, the person who finished first wins? And we're going to go ahead and explore that in this tutorial. Let me go ahead and show you guys the setup. Let's go ahead and go through the steps. So this is what we have for step 1, which is the pre-game. Players start in the pre-game, then they're transported to the race start holding area. I do have a notation of devices used here for this tutorial. We got spawn pads, a race manager, race checkpoints, teleporters, timers, triggers, a player counter, and a mutator zone. Step number 2, the game starts. Players are teleported to a holding area with a timer for when the game starts. When the timer ends, they're teleported to their bikes. Step number 3, the race begins. Players race. First person to complete all laps receive points when teleported to the waiting area. Every racer after the third is just teleported and receives no points. Also, bikes will destroy as soon as a player is teleported, so the area is not cluttered. And last but not least is when the last player finishes, they are teleported to the holding area. Then after 10 seconds, the round will end. And that's pretty much the setup. All 4 steps there. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it's gonna work. Alright, so you can see here how everything's lined up and how each device is speaking to each other. Let's see here, there's 2 different parts here because you want it to have a separate area for when they spawn when they're done with the race. So that's what this area represents. And then this area here represents the pre-game. This area here represents the holding area when the game starts. And this is after the pre-game. This is when they're waiting to get on their bikes. And then of course this is the whole race course right here. I just made a really quick one. So let me go ahead and show you how this is flowing. Alright, so with this flow, the players start here. This is the pre-game. They wait 10 seconds and then they're transported here. When they're transported here, a timer starts. And they wait another 10 seconds before they get on the bikes. When this timer ends, when it's complete, it's going to send a signal here to start the race. And then players will be transported directly to their bikes. They'll then see arrows because the race has begun, and they'll start the course. This course is set for 3 laps, so once they're done with 3 laps, this mutator zone is here. When they're done with 3 laps, this will enable and disable at the same time and transport them to the holding area. Alright, as each player is coming through, this is where they're going to end up. So just to explain this here a bit more, first player will start here, second player will end up here, third player will end up here, and everyone else will end up here. The flow is going a little bit like this. When the player spawns here, this teleporter will disable. It will enable this one, but at the same time it's going to trigger and award 100 points to the first player and an award. And then when the next person passes through, they will spawn here and the process will be the same. They get 50 points for second place, 115 for third. That is because I have the game set to score and highest score wins. When the last person comes through, it's going to enable a timer to start for 10 seconds and then the game will end. So when I do this test, the game will not end because there's only one player in the map. If you want to counteract that issue and you want the option to be flexible, then I advise you implement a player counter into the setup. Now that you know the flow of everything, let me go ahead and show you the settings. Now, first we're going to start with game settings because this is very important for this type of game. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so for game settings, this is what I have. Voice chat is set to all. Max players is 4 and it's set to free for all. The team size is 1 person per team. We're setting on flexible teams for matchmaking type and it's a public game. Alright, we're going to revert to default class at the end of game, and the default class is none because we're not working with classes. Alright, spawn limit is infinite, and after last spawn go to spectator. But you really don't need to change that. Total rounds is 3. You can definitely put whatever you like. In-game on match point win is no. Team visuals determined at round start. The time limit is none because we're using an in-game device. Fastest time win is disabled, and that is because we're using an in-game device, so we don't want that to go off automatically. All teams must finish is set to no. The game win condition is most score wins. Eliminations to end is off. AI enemy eliminations to end is off. Objectives to end is off. Collect items to end is off. Score to end is off. Last standing ends game is off. Join in progress is spectate. Spawn location should be spawn pads. Spawn pad selection is random. Respawn type is individual. Post game spawn location is island start. Allow respawn if pads are found, and that is no. Auto start is off. Game start countdown is 3 seconds. Of course, this is personal choice from here. Alright, next up is the UI. So what you're looking for here is everything else at the top. This is kind of personal preference. The HUD info type should be score. Show top center scoring HUD no. If you're using trackers, you want to put how many you would like to show. Show cumulative stat value on HUD is no. Show resource speed on eliminations is no. Use team score is no. Time alive for team tracking method is sum. Time alive start point is round start. Round win condition is score. There's no tiebreakers needed. First scoreboard column is score. The second scoreboard column is time. On the map screen display, you want them to see the score. Display overview map is set to no. Again, that's personal preference, so if that's what you like, you can go ahead and put a yes to that. Display scoreboard is yes. Display career scoreboard is no. Show cumulative scoreboard is no. Show individual scores, that option, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Include players who left game and score, exclude them. Show island code watermark, personal preference. And then the rest is personal preference. Let's go ahead and go through the settings for each of the devices. And this is where the game will start. Pretty basic here. You want enable during phase always, player team any, player class any, priority group, do not override, and use as island start. Visible in game is on because this is a tutorial, but when you have your game live, be sure to set that off. Play audio is no. Enemy range check, that doesn't really matter. This is just the pregame. Display enemy range when near, again that doesn't matter, so you can turn that off. Enable when receiving from, you don't need any channels, and there you go. let's go ahead and take a look at the startup timer. Alright, so let's see here. The duration is at 10 seconds. The timer name I put until game starts. The direction is a countdown. Start timer at game start is on. Activating team is any. Allowed class is any. Applies to everyone. So this basically means here is when the game starts, the timer is going to start. And it's going to start that countdown for 10 seconds. And it will apply to everyone who's in the game at the time. You want the result to be a success. And when it's complete, you can stop it or disable it. It's truly up to you. Well, let's just go with stop. And then visible during game is yes. You can choose whatever color you like and whichever way you want the time to display. You can add a timer not started text. I usually just do a timer running text. And then of course everything else is personal preference. You want it to show on the HUD, and you can choose whatever text style you like. If you want it to be saved, and since this is a pre-game timer, you really don't need to do that. Let's see, auto save is off. Auto load save data is on, but let's turn it off. Urgency mode time is never. And then of course, I don't think that's needed for the pre-game timer. And let's check out the channels. So let's see here. The only thing that you need to set here is on success, transmit on 1. And there you go. So again, whatever channel groups you're using, that's what you're going to want to do. And that's how you set up the pre-game timer. Alright. Next up is the teleporter that they're going to be transported to. Alright, let's see here. So, let's take a look at these settings. Teleporter group is none. Teleporter target group is none. Enabled during phase all. Team is all. Change teleporter target is never. Link to target is no. Teleporter rip visible, no. Play visual effects, no. Play sound effects, no. Conserve momentum, no. Face player and teleporter direction, yes. Again, that's all optional from here. Effects class, all but selected. Selected class, none. Effect radius off. Maintain relative position, yes. Skydive after teleport, not necessary. Maintain momentum during teleport to event world. And let's take a look at the channels. The only channel you're going to need, as you see, is teleport to when receiving from, and that is set to 1. And that's when the timer succeeds. It's going to teleport them right here. Next is the race timer until race starts. So they have to wait another 10 seconds. This setup is very similar with the exception that you want to turn off start timer at game start here. This is set to off. That way this does not start until they're transported over here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We have duration at 10 seconds. Timer name until race starts. The direction is a countdown. Timer start timer at game start is off. Activating team is any. Allowed class is any. Applies to everyone. Result will be a success. Completion, stop. Visible during game, yes. And that's only because we're testing once you're live, you want to make sure you turn that to no. Personal choice. Choosing the color you want. Choose if you want to be seconds or minutes. Let's go with seconds. Timer not started text, I didn't put anything there, just the timer running text. And everything's really familiar. You want to show them the HUD. The label style is bold. You don't want to save the timer. This one, auto load save the data is on, but it really doesn't quite matter. Now let's see, if instigating player is not present, I'm just going to pick a random player. And display score update on HUD is off. Audio effects is on. Let's look at channels, and this is start when receiving from channel 1. So this is when on success, transmit on channel 2. Alright, channel 2 goes to the race manager. So let's see, you can put a name for your race. The race circuit name is race. There's 3 laps. You do not want to start the race at game start for this type of game mode. You want the navigation to be visible. It definitely helps the players. Display checkpoint markers, very helpful. These ranges here are personal choice depending on your map. So right now I have it set to 500 and 400. I believe these are standard, and this is because we're just testing. Display race HUD, yes. Display race progress on HUD, yes. Display race time on HUD, yes. Display best lap, yes. And then let's look at the channels. So the only thing we're using here is start race when receiving from channel 2. And then when it's complete, transmit on channel 3, which is a very important channel, you'll see. Now as soon as that timer ends, they're going to be transported to the bikes. Now I have the bikes assigned by team. So since, as you see in the game settings, we have 4 players, the teams is a free-for-all. Team size is 1, right? But if you want it to be a little bit more specific, you can set it to 4, right? That way when people come in, they're automatically assigned a team. And depending on how many people you have depends on how many bikes you can spawn, so keep that in mind too. So you may want to think about how many players you want in your race, because you don't want to have too many players and not have enough bikes. So when I spawn, since I'm the only player, I will be assigned to team 1. And as soon as that timer ends, I'm going to end up on this bike right here. This is the team 1 sport bike path. And then the game will start. Alright, so let's take a look at the checkpoints. Alright, so you can assign your checkpoint a number. And this is checkpoint 1. I believe I have 7. There's also an option to set to highest, and that's really handy if you have a lot. Allow pass without vehicle, you want to make sure you set that to no. Allowed vehicles is all. Inactive checkpoint color is white. Current checkpoint color is blue. When it's completed, it's going to be fuchsia. Visible before race starts, only the first time only. Is the checkpoint going to be visible when passed? Nope. Activating team is any. Allowed for any class. You can play the audio, that definitely, adds to the experience there. You want to enable it in phase all, and let's take a look at the channels. So these are not going to be sending to any channels. So we can go ahead and go out of that, and each one is practically the same. The only difference is the checkpoint numbers. Alright, so this is checkpoint 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is the last one. Alright, so you can notice by my last checkpoint I have a mutator zone. And let's take a look at the settings here for this. Right, allow weapon fire is no, allow building is no. You want to make sure these are off as well. Make sure you set it to the size of your checkpoint. I have it enabled during phase none. This is very important because you don't want it to enable until a certain channel transmits to it. Affects players, yes. Affects creatures, yes. Affects guards, again these are personal preference. And pick up lifespan, personal preference. Selected team is none. Class is none. And you want to leave both the effects teams and the effects class on all but selected. Allow editing is no. Building cost and building speed, you can just leave those at the standard 100%. Allow jumping is yes, and that's because once that bike disappears, the first instinct of the player may be to jump, so why not? So I put the gravity down very low. That way they stay within the zone in case that happens. Enabling the VFX definitely helps, and then let's take a look at the channels. So we have enable when receiving from 3, and that's when each player completes the race. It's going to transmit on 3. And then when it does that, when the player enters the zone, it's going to transmit on 4 and disable the zone as well. So when each player goes through, it's going to transmit and enable the device. They're going to transmit on 4 and be teleported, and this device will disable so that it does not affect the next player. As soon as they pass through and it's transmitted on 4, first player will end up here. And you can see here we have teleporter group is none, teletarget group is none, enable during phase is all. It's pretty much the same settings. Everything's pretty standard until you get to the channels. So let's take a look at that. And I'll just kind of go through this slowly for you guys. Alright, so now we're at the channels. So teleport 2 when receiving from 4. You want this to be enabled because, you know, someone's got to be first. Disabled when receiving from 5. And when teleported to, transmit on 5. So as soon as they're teleported here, it's going to transmit on 5 to disable this teleporter. And then the trigger is going to go off on 5. When it's triggered, it's going to transmit on 6 and disable this. This is going to activate the score manager on 6. Everything else is the same. No channels. And then award and accolade on 6. When the next person passes through, this will only be enabled when receiving from 5. And disabled when receiving from 3. When the person is teleported, they're going to be transmitted on 7. But they're not going to be teleported to until receiving from 4. So that can get a little bit confusing with the channels. 4 is the main channel that the mutator zone is connected to. So all these teleporters are connected to 4, but they're being enabled and disabled at certain times. So I'll run that through again. It's going to teleport to when receiving from 4. It will not be enabled until this is disabled. So enable when receiving from 5. Disable when receiving from 3. 3 is the channel when the race starts. So remember, this one's always enabled. Always enabled, but this is going to disable when the race starts. This one also will disable when the race starts, but we'll get to that later. That way, when the race starts, this is the only active teleporter until the first player comes in. And then when the first player comes in, it's going to start a chain of events for the rest. Alright, so when teleported to transmit on 7, that's going to do the same process here. Trigger when receiving from 7, when trigger transmit on 8, and disable on 8. It's going to go right down the line. It's going to award the points at 8. So activate when receiving from 8, and award when receiving from 8. Alright, so the third player rift is going to enable when receiving from 8, which is the same channel where the second player is awarded. It's going to disable from 3 and teleport to when receiving from 4. When teleported to, transmit on 9. right? Trigger when receiving from 9, and when trigger transmit on 10. And of course the process is the same. This is going to award on 10, activate when receiving from 10, and award when receiving from 10, and accolade for the third prize winner. Now as they come in, it's connected to player reference device, and that is connected to the last channels in the system here. So let's see, channel 10 is connected to register the third player. Everything else is no channel. You can set your player reference device however you like. So I won't really go through that because that's all personal choice. First place awards on 6, so this will register on 6. And second place awards on 8, so it will register on 8 as well. Alright, once first, second, and third player is in, then it's time for everyone else to come through. But they're still going to get some prizes. So this will enable when receiving from 10, and disable when receiving from 3. Teleport to when receiving from 4. When they're teleported to this transporter, it will transmit on channel 11. Channel 11 will award them a small XP prize. Alright, and as soon as they come in, it's time to end the round. And the round will end in 10 seconds. And the rest of the setup is practically the same, like I showed you for the first 2 timers. Except this is going to start when receiving from channel 11. And when complete, it's going to transmit on channel 12. So on success, transmit on channel 12. Channel 12 will end the game. And this is the setting for the end game device. You want it to end the round, not the entire game. Set it to winning team, which should be set to score. And you can set whatever you like for your custom victory call out and defeat, your game end call out as well. This can be enabled at game start, that's fine. But if you want it to just only enable, it's up to you. You can set it to disable and then have it enable only when the last player comes through. You can do that as well. Activating team is any, allowed class is any, and again, everything else from here is personal choice. And that's it. That's how you set it up. Let's go ahead and run a test, and I can show you how the system is working. Alright, you see we have a few seconds before the game starts. Alright, now we're at the holding area before we get to the bikes. Time to race. Let's go. There you go. I got awarded 100 score. And here in the first place. And that's how you do it. Yo, I really enjoy bringing you guys this content. If you like it, please drop a like and a sub. would really help out the channel, and can't wait to bring you more. If you do, you are awesome! Let's go! Alright you guys, that's gonna do it for this tutorial. I do hope it helped you out, and you guys can create some amazing race games with this. I really know you can. You got it in you. You can do it. If you have any more requests, you know what to do. Just drop those requests down below. I'll do my best to make it if I can, and if I have the time to do so. Alright, I'll see you guys on the next video. Again, thanks for being here. Keep it positive and keep it safe. Bye!